Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lucifer, the latest episode of Supergirl, as well as the latest episode of The Gifted. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time and I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Lucifer, you could skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Supergirl, and or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Gifted. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Lucifer. A great episode with a lot of stuff that went down. So obviously let's break things down bit by bit. Obviously, this is about a counselor at like a reform kind of farm of sorts that takes like bad teens and stuff who come from different backgrounds and different situations. They do bad things and trying to get them reformed. The lady name is Emily is killed, and basically Lucifer ultimate is like everyone like, no, these people are trying to change. You can't change. Like the moment you're one way, you cannot change. And and that's kind of a thought he has throughout the entire episode. Even kind of like to kind of play devil's advocate. He kind of not even playing devil's advocate, kind of playing into devil's advocate. I don't know how I properly need to phrase it. I know that doesn't apply in this situation. Nevertheless, he tries to tap into the more desire aspects of the kids. Like, oh, what do you desire? It's like, oh, I just want to get high right now. It's like one kid, he was like, oh yeah, I desire my father's love, and Lucifer's like, ooh. But basically, he tries to play it up that dark side of them, and then like teaches them how to like. It's like, okay, this is how you sell. It's like, oh, look at you, Carly, you got your own weed that you're actually building. It's like everyone worked together. Yeah. Snitches end up in ditches, and it's just like him being a terrible role model, riding on a horse, and he calls like, "What are you doing with that horse?" It's like he's looking around because he was getting high. What horse? And I mean, ultimately, what we ended up finding out for the case is that the guy who runs the place, he's actually the one behind all of this because he was working with Carly to do this whole illegal thing, and then Emily found out. And he ended up killing her for it. And in his mind, it's like, well, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm getting paid. I'm doing this bad thing. Sure, but I've done some good in my time and stuff like that. Which obviously doesn't change anything. Because Lucifer eventually goes, okay, I looked at things the wrong way. You were guilty all along. Like, you're the one that couldn't change. I was so focused on the kids not being the ones that changed. I forgot that you come from a similar background. So obviously it's you that couldn't change. And that side we saw, a side of Lucifer we see often enough, but like not to this extent. And that was him beating the crap out of dude because the guy shot at Chloe. Luckily, Pierce was there and took the bullet for her, but Chloe could have died. And what pissed off Lucifer the most was because he wasn't there for her when she needed him. Because Lucifer spent so much time in this episode kind of conflicted about himself. Obviously, like, he's sleeping with that lady Lexi, who her husband is a judge, who's trying to get back, fix things up with his ex-wife Marcia, because she challenges it intellectually, whereas Lexi was like, oh, she's young and fun, and I'm older, I'm trying to be young again. But it's like, oh man, like, Lexi's young and she's fun, but it's like, it's too much. I don't want to live life like that, partying and all that stuff. It's too much. So obviously he ended up owing Lucifer a favor. I do love how it paid out like that in the episode. I wonder will that be something we see going forward. I mean, to be fair, he only owes Lucifer the one favor, so we probably won't see anything beyond that going forward. But it's a situation where, walking away from this episode, you can tell Lucifer is conflicted on what he is because he has his wing. He's trying so hard to be the Lucifer he was, trying so hard to fight Lucifer that he feels like the wings want him to be, and the Lucifer he's become that we've kind of known over the course of this series. And you have a Minidal, who I love his role in the entire episode being like trying to play up being Lucifer, and then he got busted for like trying to sleep with a prostitute. He's like, I know what a prostitute is. I just didn't know she was one. And her cousin is like, that's not her cousin, that's her pimp. And he's kind of like, right. He's like, kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. And I love it. Out of anyone, it's Dan that he ended up calling, which I love. That's an aspect that, obviously last season tackled, and we're definitely building upon that this season, is the bond between Dan and the Minidal. They're kind of becoming buddies. I mean, really, they kind of like bonded over the fact it doesn't matter of how much they don't like Lucifer was kind of their big thing last season. And obviously, Dan tried to bring him into the whole like improv scene and everything, which didn't work out, if we all remember correctly. But for Minidal, he's trying to find his place, and obviously try to walk a mile in Lucifer's shoes, WWLD, what would Lucifer do? But it didn't work out. And, ultimately, I love how Dan be like, oh, what's there to know about Lucifer? He's super rich, almost has an endless supply of money. The fact he sleeps with a girl almost every night in the middle. I know. It's such an empty life. It's like, oh, yeah, I feel so bad for Lucifer. But for a minute now, he figures out in his mind, like his purpose is to help Lucifer, to keep Lucifer on the path that he's on, to be there for him, essentially. Because he looks at Lucifer, it's like, you say people can't change? Look at you. You're not the same person you are. The reason why you did that was because that wasn't just about punishing someone. That was about Chloe, because you felt bad because you weren't there to be by her side when she needed you the most, because you care about Chloe. And that's something they kind of taken a step back from. Like I think he's trying to keep his heart, like, because he wanted to open up to her, but it didn't work out because he couldn't show her his true face. And so things kind of fell back. And now, him and Chloe are in this space where it's almost like, I don't know, they're good partners still, but it's like you still can feel like it's not where it was before. Because I'm sure for Chloe, it was like she put her heart out there and just Lucifer smacked it away every time, which is just like, Lucifer at first was scared, and by the time he wanted to tell her the truth, now he can't do it. Now he's dealing with his own issues. Like, it's because Lucifer has had the biggest identity complex he's ever had so far. Once again, like I brought up, like the different sides of him, who he is and who he should be. To the point he's even trying to push Amenadal away, being like, "Oh, you're pathetic. You're like that soul I used to torture, not having a purpose outside of me. Me torturing them brought meaning to their pathetic existence." And it's like, you're doing the same thing. I'm a recollection of all the stuff that you once were, that you were the first son, that you were this great and powerful angel, and now you're nothing. And Amenadal's like, I know what you're trying to do, and it doesn't matter, brother. I'm still going to be there for you. And it's because I think Lucifer has a hard time accepting help, especially under these circumstances, because he's so confused, because he's always been so certain, I'm Lucifer, I'm the devil, and it's just like, what does that even really mean anymore? That was the whole purpose of him getting back into, because he tried to take, obviously what he normally does is twist Linda's advice, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna get back into favor business, no one can do it like me, but he can't slip back into doing that, because that's not him anymore. Like that playboy life, yeah, he plays it up a little bit, but more so than anything, you can tell that's a reaction to like the whole Chloe situation, because he can't be with the person he obviously loves, just for different circumstances. It led to him trying to kind of go back to his old persona, like, try to fit back in those bad habits, but it doesn't work anymore. And now we see him, like, I mean, obviously that final shot of the episode, him throwing the bottle and the glass being shattered, and you see like his shattered face, it's like the perfect reflection of like what he feels like, because he doesn't know, like, a shattered identity. I mean, a big part in this episode too, it kind of brings up an interesting thing, because obviously, like, Pierce constantly kind of basically shits on Chloe the entire episode. At first, she kind of treats it as like, oh, it's got to be Lucifer. But most of the time, Pierce is like, oh, wow, that's good. That's a good idea. Or good going, Lucifer. And it's just like, wait, what? Because it's like Lucifer handles things in kind of like a cutting corners type of way. And Chloe's like, no, we're going to keep things on the up and not cut any corners, because she wants to prove herself to Pierce. But he kind of turns her down, kind of berates her at every turn. And ultimately, it's like, Ella kind of treats it as like, obviously he has a thing for you, you just don't even realize it. Why I even love her situation of being like, well, obviously I thought he felt the same way too, that he didn't like me, and then he handed me cream and sugar without me having to say anything. And it's like, man, Ella, you read into the weirdest things. Because she brought that up the first time he came into the office. Like, we had this moment where it's like, I forgot what it was over donuts or something like that, and she had bought him donuts in or something, but it's like, oh yeah, it's for you guys too. Yeah. No truth to what Ella said, because it seems like Pierce was kind of being a dick, because he was like, because I know you're good at your job, you're like the best detective. It's like, obviously didn't want to say all that because it would have gone to your head, but it's like the whole union rep job, because it's like, that's a waste of your talent. You're like one of the best detectives. I need you out there doing your job. And the fact is he took the bullet for her, and you see a little twinkle, like, you see a little spark there between the two of them, like just the conversations between them. And obviously, something we'll probably be tackling in further on. Also, side note, the fact is he got shot and he's wounded kind of proves that he's not something supernatural. I was still kind of tapping in the back of my head like, oh, that's what he's supposed to be. But I'm thinking possibly, obviously he's a partner for Lucifer in this whole thing that they're doing. But I also think, and it's something I brought up too, like in one of my thoughts and theories about season 3, is like a new love interest for Chloe, just because things aren't going the way they should be between her and Lucifer. So it's like, obviously the complex thing, let's throw in a love interest. And it seems like Pierce might be that love interest that basically Chloe, arguably you could say like she kind of crossed that professional line too when she, I don't know if it would still work the same thing, her being married to Dan. And even then, like her and Lucifer kind of having a thing, even though they're partners and everything. So, but it does seem like Pierce might have a thing for her. This might be a situation of like, because it might, it definitely ties into the whole, the Centerman situation with Pierce, because we don't know a lot of his story, and the way he was kind of talking about death early in the episode, it's kind of like, you know, to him, it never really hit him before. So it seems like in one particular incident where he talked to Lucifer about, like, you lose the people that you love. So I'm sure that's something we'll kind of learn about later on. But for now, like I said, it does seem like they're situating him to possibly be a love interest that maybe catches Chloe's attention. I am curious to know what that means for her, like her and Lucifer, like, because Lucifer, you know, not ready to really accept all that again, because it's like until he gets his devil face back, you know, because that's what this whole Cinnamon situation did to him, because it's like without his devil face, he doesn't feel like he's him anymore, especially now with everything changing and him changing, you know? I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's not like this whole situation is something new. Lucifer has always kind of did that. Like, obviously, when he's dealing with an issue, he kind of projects upon, like, his own issues. Obviously, like, this whole episode, obviously, he was projecting, like, oh, you can't change, because he's trying to tell himself, like, no, I'm still the same devil. I just reprised my role. I'm back to punish. It's like, no, like, you're not the same person that you were. And, you know, because, you know, it also, I guess it ties back to, you know, Lucifer's own daddy issues, in the sense of, like, he was labeled something for so long. He was just the devil, you know, who punished people and stuff like that. But now it's like he's shifting. It's like for so long he was labeled that by his brothers, by, you know, his dad to be the king of hell and everything. And it's like now you're telling him he can be someone else. And it just, I feel like it's messing with, you know, messing with his mind. So I am curious to see, like, I mean, it's such, like I said, it's such a fascinating aspect to his character. Like I said, he's never been divided on who he was before until now. And I never thought that getting his wings back would do that to him, leave him not wondering who he is, you know? Trying to overcompensate by kind of reverting back to who he once was. I mean, that ultimately makes you wonder, like, how will this all end? Like, you know, is like, when it's all said and done, will he ever get his devil face back, or will he always have his wings? And what does this mean for Amenadal? Like, is this the right path? Is this what his dad always intended? It wasn't like for you to come and boss your brother around and return him to hell. It's like your brother was going to go down a path, and your path is to work side by side with him. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the reason why he was able to tap into his powers, because it was a moment of him just kind of putting everything aside and caring about Linda, someone that they all care about, him, Mazikeen, and Lucifer. So maybe that's kind of a clue to that. Maybe that's just me reading too much into it, and that's still a question too. Like, you know, once again, why did Amenadal lose his powers? Was losing his powers supposed to humble him so he's not so caught up in everything that he can, like, it took him a while, but finally taking a step back and realizing, like, oh, I should do this, you know? Because, like, I mean, we don't really, like, it doesn't ever seem like, I mean, at least to the recollection, they've never really brought it up, like, what kind of brother Amenadal was to Lucifer prior to all of this, you know? Because he always looked at stuff like, oh, I'm God's favorite, I am, you know, above you, you're fallen, you're the devil, I am still an angel, I'm the firstborn, you know, stuff like that. So I think this situation was meant to strip Amenadal of his pride and everything. Obviously, everything else that subsequently happened, Charlotte, Uriel, it's hard to say whether that was part of the grand plan, or, you know, kind of one of those situations of, is God, you know, free will and all that, or is everything like an orchestrated plan that he's got filled out? I feel like there might be a little sway here and there, because obviously, like, Chloe being birthed and everything, because it's like her parents, like, had to, like, try over and over again, and Amenadal kind of helped make her happen. So obviously there is a little planning, but at the same time, I think it is, like, kind of have your own, like, free, like, flow of things. So, like I said, we still don't 100% know what Chloe's purpose is when it comes to Lucifer either. So maybe we'll see that kind of unravel, you know, this season. I did catch a glimpse of next week's episode. I won't spoil it, but we do have a return of a certain character, which I'm very interested to see how that all falls apart. Like I said, it's something I've kind of brought up in the past. I'm like, what does that mean? I won't go specific because it will spoil things, but I'm so interested to see what goes down in the next episode. Not just with that, but with everything else going forward, too, from here on out. I actually saw in the previews really quick, I'm going to bring this up. Mazikeen still doesn't know about the whole wing situation. I just thought about that. Because I think I saw in a preview, and I would have thought it would have been last episode she found out, but it's like, no, she still hasn't found out, so it's probably going to be, like, soon enough that she ends up finding out about that. She's, like, the only one that doesn't know about the whole, like, his wings returning thing. So it's also interesting, too, because we haven't really taken any steps towards the whole Cinnamon case as well. So I'm curious to see, like, what way that goes. And I mean, there's, like I said, there's still that small part of my brain that's like, part of me still has this weird feeling like it's actually Pierce who's actually the Centerman on some weird level, but it's like, I mean, like I said, we proved that he was human, but who's to say the Centerman didn't get access to some supernatural stuff, but is actually human, you know? So I don't know, like that's just my thoughts. Like I said, cannot wait to see what goes down in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Supergirl. Another great episode. This is actually like a very heavily character development episode, obviously with a lot of story progression too. Obviously a lot of stuff went down, so we'll break things bit by bit. But obviously let's start off with the Mars stuff, which is so interesting. It's kind of like something I brought up when I was talking about season 1, and that always kind of threw me for a loop. It's like, Kara can't breathe in space. It's like, I could have sworn there was plenty of stuff that, I mean, it seems like it's a comic book thing too, but I was like, I vaguely remember seeing Superman flying around in the cartoons, like especially in Justice League and stuff without, like, you know, a spacesuit or whatever, not needing to breathe and everything. Like, it seemed more recent things that kind of brought that back up. They're like, apparently that is a thing, but I guess for this continuity, they just want to make it so like they can. Because I don't know. I feel like John can do the same thing too. Because the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because of the whole ship thing, which I love. The fact is that his ship is disguised as like some like retro car, and then like even cars like, okay, your vehicle is a car, your ship is a car. It's like, I come from a planet of shapeshifters, so of course our technology and ships would do the same. It's like, that actually makes pretty good sense. Also, it seems like it does have some weaponry. I'm sure we didn't get to see what it was fully capable of, but that was pretty cool, just seeing it shift like that. The most recent thing I ever saw that did something like that was Telltale's Batman. It's kind of a spoiler, but his like car, like just his regular like red car, can actually shift and turn into the Batmobile, like changing color and everything. It just kind of immediately reminded me of that. That was like the most recent thing I'd seen that kind of elaborated on something like that too. But obviously, something I forgot to bring up last week when I was talking about last week's episode was the end part where we had McGon reaching out to John. So John and Supergirl go to Mars simply because it's like, well, the fact of the matter is, you know, Kara's like, if the shoe was on the other foot, you would definitely be there for me. So she wants to do the same. So it seems like the White Martian resistance is working, obviously, with McGon. So we do see there is progression here, that there are White Martians who want to kind of end all the struggle. They're looking for a device that the White Martians are looking for. It's basically a staff that kind of belonged to, like, a god, which is so interesting because I don't, like, I'm not that familiar with a lot of, like, you know, Green Martian or just Martians in general in the DC universe. It's kind of interesting because in this episode, we kind of found out a lot more about their beliefs, like who the first Martian was. It was like this dude named Phoebus who ended up getting, like, ended up taking a staff, which the god, like, was pissed that his son chose the power of destruction rather than the book. I think his older son chose the book, and it's like, you chose, you know, you could, no, like, I don't think it was his son. It was someone else chose the book, and that person I think was essentially the first Green Martian. Phoebus was the son, and he chose the staff of power of destruction. And it's like, you had a choice that you could have picked the right path, but you chose this one. So he was the beginning of the White Martians. But not even just that, like, you also found out that John isn't the only Green Martian still alive. You found out that his dad's alive. That was kind of like crazy because, I mean, especially because John spent so long believing he was the only one. Turns out his dad thought the same thing too. His dad's been tortured for like centuries, but basically 200 years, which is crazy when you break it down. It's like, holy crap, like, how long has John been on Earth? Like, was he on Earth that entire time, or did he just, was he other, because he when he was talking to his dad, he was like, I escaped the Earth. So it was like, he escaped the Earth like 200 years ago? It's like, holy crap, I didn't think he was on Earth that long. Like, in my mind, when him and Jeremiah, like, met each other, like, I thought that was kind of it. Like, I thought that was kind of the end-all, be-all, and it's like, and it was going to be like he had just gotten there around that time. And it's like, no, he's been here. I guess he just shifted a lot to kind of blend in with everybody. So, because in my head, I thought Hank Henshaw was kind of like the first human form he took. You know, maybe it's just kind of like adding more context to, like, continuity that's already there. So, I mean, nevertheless, you know, him, mainly because he's been tortured and messed with by the White Martians for so long. It's like, oh no, there's no way you be my son, because my son would never run away. He wouldn't run away like a coward. He's brave and strong, essentially. And so it leaves John a little conflicted, because obviously the White Martians like, we need to find this device now, because it's like a psychic staff, and with it, the White Martians will be able to track down all the resistance members and wipe them out. It took Kara sitting down and talking to him to really make him go, open his mind. It's like, yeah, you don't want to believe that it's your son because it's like you've been hurt so long, because it's like if you open up your mind and think, oh, this is my son, but it turns out not to be, like it'll be, and he said himself, it's almost like he died all over again, which Kara can understand his situation, being the, essentially the last of her race too, but at least in his case it's worse because his planet is still around, and all you can see are what kind of was. And now your planet is not the beautiful place that it once was. But fortunately, John was able to kind of get through to his dad. And there was even a sad moment where it's like you saw a relived memory where it was John's birthday, and he's there with his two little girls, and his dad came home to kind of surprise him early and stuff like that. And it's just, that has to hit him hard too, because even he's like, that's one of my happiest memories. It's not like he forgets about his daughters. I'm sure he thinks about them often, but I'm sure like seeing them in that form, almost like realistic right there, almost like you can reach out and touch them like that, in that form of like psychically, like in shaping the room in the form of a memory like that. It has to hit a little hard too. So it is kind of interesting to see that going deeper into it is the whole staff situation of how powerful that thing is, because every time they zap someone, they just like poof into particles and stuff like that. So that was kind of the main thing. It was kind of badass, obviously, seeing everyone fight together. The White Martians, Kara, Magan, and John. And ultimately, they were able to get the staff away. And initially, they were going to leave it the White Martians, but one of the White Martians was like, nah, we can't. Like, the fact of the matter is, we saw what this thing is capable of, and it's a weapon that, like, you guys should take with you and hide somewhere else. We'll kind of find a different way. As long as it's not in their hands to do what they want with it, that's fine. Like, we'll find a different way to kind of handle this with by our own means, because it's a powerful weapon of destruction, and it's like they'd have to find like a different way of handling this. Maybe they'll be able to bring more White Martians over to their side. I mean, because this is no longer just about like the Green Martians are gone. John and his dad are the last of their kind, but they're still home on Mars for the White Martians too. That basically the last two Green Martians and these White Martians can work together to build something there, to ensure that it's not just rule and go to the next planet and destroy, that they build a world of their own that's, full of peace and not just war, and we're ready to destroy other races just because they want to, or it feels something in them to do it, so. I was kind of halfway expecting John's dad to end up staying on Mars, but turns out not to be the case. He's actually come home to Earth with him, which is going to be interesting. I'm interested to see how that dynamic goes from here. Obviously, his dad getting adjusted to this world and stuff, but still. Overall, I mean, that whole situation had a happy ending. Sadly, Magan isn't coming back, mainly because she's got to stay on Mars to help with that situation. But, hopefully we'll see her kind of return back to Earth, soon. Once again, I'll bring it up. I'm kind of confused on the whole, like, what they're doing with Magan and John in this series, because like I brought this up like last season when I talked about it. Like, Magan and John kind of had like a uncle-niece relationship, and Young Justice. So that's the relationship I kind of went into this expecting, but it seems like it might be more. Maybe there's an intimate thing there. Maybe it's just a like good friendship. I don't know. I kind of feel like they're aiming for like there's like an intimate relationship. It's weird just because, like I said, I'm going into it with that pre-established thing. I mean, nothing's like actually happened between them, but it might be a situation where it's like, it's not like, because I don't know if John would really be ready to move on anyway, but for him, maybe it's just like a situation of like, no, it's not intimate like that. It is a form of intimacy, but like, it's like, we are family, like we're in this together, helping kind of keep Mars alive in a certain shape or form. I know I'm just kind of like running my mouth off, so I do apologize, but it just kind of got me thinking about that whole situation. So I don't know. And obviously on the flip side of the episode is a more grounded side of things, like no like bad guys or aliens running wild on Earth. It's actually focusing on Maggie's relationship with her dad. Because last season we found out like Maggie's whole situation about when she came out to her parents. It turns out we didn't even get the full story, because it comes out like her dad, which just kicked her out when she was 14, packed her bags, and was like, yo, you basically looked at her with disgust and was like, you're ashamed, dropped her off at her aunt's house. They have not spoken since she was 14. And Alex is like, oh, this might be the perfect opportunity to mend fences. You're different. Your dad's different. It's a different time. And, initially Maggie is very reserved on the whole situation, but then you have her still doing it anyway. And it seems at first, I was actually surprised. I was like, oh man, things are actually working. The dad's there. He's like, kept up with her career and everything. He's proud of her. And he meets Alex and it's like, I was like, it's like, where are the pictures of you? And he pulls out a little picture of her and puts it on board. Cause sadly, she ended up hearing from her aunt, like her mom wiped her from the books. So it's not even just her dad. It's not like her dad did it and her mom had to, cause even her mom didn't even bother showing up. So I think that kind of speaks volumes. But the dad shows up. I was like, part of me was hoping on everything. It's like, at the very least, tell me, it's like, you're actually okay with this. You've grown okay with it. That basically was her mom that had such a problem. It's like, nah, Maggie was like, sure, like with I don't know, like I was hoping he had changed. And it seemed like he might have until they started kissing and he had such a problem. I'm like, dude, no. And then Maggie's like, what is your problem? And for him, it's like respect, essentially. He's like, I worked so hard to get to where we are now. The fact of the matter is, I had people basically beat me down, metaphorically, well, I'm sure in a literal sense, but also a metaphorical sense, spit on him, calling him terrible names because of his ethnicity and where he's from. And the fact of the matter is like those people now respect him. He's like a sheriff or something like that. So taps into the whole like why she wanted to be a cop, I guess. And then on top of that, it's like, but then like, I want to build a place where you could grow up fine. You wouldn't have to go through the hardships I did. And then lo and behold, here you are. You turn out to be gay. You couldn't just be it's almost like he's saying like, oh, you can't be normal. It's like that should change anything, Gay or straight, it doesn't matter. That's your little girl. You should love her no matter what, And it's just, because he made it seem like everything was her fault. Like, everything was fine. All you had to do was fit in and belong. Like she doesn't belong anywhere just because she's gay. It's like, what kind of like you have your own issues and you're projecting upon your issues onto her, making it everyone does it. Oh yeah, his daughter, she's gay. It's like, what? What do you, like people are whispering about your gay daughter to the point you don't even acknowledge she exists anymore, apparently. And it's like, I was so hoping, I was like, oh man, the men fences. And then, but Maggie was like, you know what? I'm here to see you off. And like, I don't need your love anymore, Dad. The fact of the matter is, ever since I was a little girl, I've held on to that, hoping. The reason why I even called you is because there's a part of me that's still hoping I could get your love and attention. And it's like, ultimately, she's like, I don't need it because I have people here who love me, who surround me with love. I don't need, your love anymore. I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm a full-grown woman who makes her own choices. So you don't want to be a part of my life? Because even he said it himself, it's like, well, the fact of the matter is you can do whatever you want to. Just don't expect me to stand there and be happy with it and stuff like that. She's like, so fine, I'll live my life. Goodbye. So whether there's any many fences past that, it doesn't seem like it. Like her dad has kind of set in stone of like, hey, I'm like this and there's no going back. At least that's how it seems like for me. So maybe there'll be something in the future, but for me, like, it seems like that chapter is kind of closed. And it's so heartbreaking to see that chapter of like, seeing that side of Maggie's story kind of unfold and having to deal with that. I mean, because it shows you and I think it does a beautiful job of showing you the opposite side of things. Like, Alex's situation is the super positive side of like, this is what, like, you surrounded with open-minded people who love you no matter what, who are like, oh my God, my daughter's getting married and she's in love. That's all that matters. Everyone surrounded her is like, yeah, who cares, especially last season. So it doesn't matter. But then you see Maggie's side of things of like, that's what it's like to have people who don't support you in your life. If those people don't support you, you just have to cut them out of your life, no matter how hard and how heartbreaking that is. But if they can't just love you for being you, then enjoy the happiness and the people that are around you and just live your life, essentially, So it has a happy ending in that regard. You're like, oh yeah. And then it kind of has a sour ending where you go, oh, right, because the whole conversation goes back to the kids. Because in some shape or form, Alex is thinking like, okay, the issues with her dad now that they've been resolved, her family issues, her upbringing, it's like, okay, so you want kids now, right? And Maggie's like, no matter what, my family issues weren't the reason why I didn't want to have kids. The fact of the matter is, you're all I need. I see this beautiful future of us spending time together, us being together, but it doesn't include kids. But I need you to tell me, like, are you okay with this? Which Alex is like, of course. She's like, yeah, of course I am. Which is like, no, you're not. I wasn't actually, because I think it came up last week's episode, and it's so interesting to see it kind of develop more, because I brought up, like, I'd love to see that develop more, and it seems like it is there, which this is a conversation that's going to put a strain on a relationship, because Maggie doesn't want kids. Alex obviously wants some in the future, and it's like, when you're not on the same wavelength, no matter how much love there is, that's still a situation of like, you wanting two different things isn't going to necessarily gel well. Like, I'm sure Alex is going to be like, no, I'm just going to hide the fact is that I would want kids and just those feelings just, because I love Maggie and I'm super happy. I mean, it's one of those situations that I think we're definitely going to be dealing with in the near future, probably like around the time of their wedding. It's going to be a situation like, I feel like they've written it kind of in a sense of like, they're going to ultimately break up. I get the feeling. Just simply because the fact of the matter is they want two different things. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, maybe eventually given enough time, and maybe that's what Alex is hoping for, maybe given enough time, Maggie would change her mind and she's like, no, I actually want kids now. Maybe something like that will happen. But for now, it's like, sadly, it seems like you might be going down two different paths because it's like, Maggie's 100% she's like, I don't want kids. Alex is like, I kind of like kids, It's like, not saying we have them immediately, but it's like, oh yeah, I like to grow our family, So I don't know, like I said, it's kind of a bittersweet ending. It's actually kind of on a very sad note on that side of things. So, other side of things, I guess, I mean, it's also a reflection too when you actually think about it, because it's like things with John, Dad's situation ended a lot more positively than the whole Maggie situation and her dad. So, it's kind of a similar situation. It's actually, it makes you wonder, did they design it like that? Like I said, like the side of Alex's family, all for her being gay and happy and in love, whereas Maggie's family, not so much. On the other side of things, John and his dad being happy and things working out. On the other side, Maggie and her dad, things are not working out. It's like when you break the episode down like that, it's just kind of interesting how that like divide works and how that happens. So I feel like that had to be intentional. There's no way they probably did that by accident, but it could 100% be me just overthinking it. It could be coincidence. I highly doubt it, but it could be. Like I said, great episode. Like I said, this was more like a character building arc while at the same time also giving you a little more information about the Martians, developing stories. Like I said, I'm curious to see where John and his dad's story go. Also about that staff. The fact is, it's on Earth now, especially because we know that there's something else on Earth that came from Krypton that I get the feeling that's definitely going to play into the story. Whether that's something they're going to have to use against it, and whether or not Samantha has something to do with that, which I'm still, like, last episode I was like, could she be the one that's actually from Krypton with the whole power thing? Or is she actually like a metahuman, and that ship thing is kind of a thing all on its own or something like that? We'll just, all those are things we'll just kind of have to wait to see, so I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Gifted. Another great episode. A lot of stuff went down, so let's break everything down. Some interesting tidbits of information we learn about Marcos in this episode. Apparently he has deep ties to the cartel. How far back? Well, we really don't know, but it seems like the whole him being a mutant thing was already kind of established when he was working with the cartel, because it seems like they took advantage of it, him having mutant abilities. But essentially, he was a part of his family. The person in particular, he went to go visit them because he needed to find out information about like the whole Lorna and Reed have been, going to be shipped off to the Sentinel facility, and it's like, we gotta get to them beforehand, but we need to find a route. So obviously Marcos plays a role in that, trying to get it from this cartel. But it turns out the guy isn't working there anymore. He actually retired. His daughter Carmen is actually running. Who apparently her and Marcos have a past, which makes her a little more less accepting to his offer, unless it's like, you give me something in return. This isn't going to work for free. You ran away. You broke my heart. And to him, it's like they wanted two different things. It's like she didn't initially want to be a part of this life, but it seems like she's embraced it. The way she makes it seem like, because at the very least we saw Lorna and Marcos kind of coming together at least 3 years ago, like as we saw was at last week's episode. So it might be, it can't be that long, but that doesn't change the fact is that maybe Marcos grew up in this life. So, but nevertheless, it's like he would do a lot for the cartel, and so Carmen's basically wanting to drag him back into that life, even making him torture a guy, which he was threatening to blind the guy, but it's like he was doing whatever he needed to, and she's like, look at you, you pretend like you don't want to be a part of this, but look at what you did. It's like, I hope that whore's worth it, referring to Lorna, because it's like, that's the woman you... I mean, he completely didn't even acknowledge, I'm sure because ultimately it's none of her business and it wouldn't change anything. It might actually even make her hate Marcos a little more if he found out that Lorna was pregnant with his child. So that would complicate things, make her less likely to help him. But that's definitely something I'm interested in seeing, because Marcos is kind of sort of the leader of the Mutant Underground. Like I said, it's kind of him and John. But now Marcos has to, do stuff for them in the future, like, you know, which in itself is something John was worried about, because John was like, he didn't want Marcos going down that path again, because like we barely like pulled you away from that life. I guess like the whole Lorna situation like 3 years ago, maybe he's the one, like maybe Lorna kind of pulled him away and kind of got him away from that life. You know, because the way Carmen puts it is almost like, oh, Lorna's, she's Lorna, that's the woman you left me for, essentially, isn't it? That's the woman you're trying to rescue. So, like I said, the question is like, was she 100% the reason why he ran away? Or, you know, maybe she was part of the reason, and he had his own reasons of just not wanting to be in that life anymore because it wasn't for him. And like I said, he talks about the fact is even the torturing aspect that like Carmen didn't want to be a part of that, but now she's there ordering him to do it because she's like, oh, I'm a businesswoman, and she's completely stepped into this world, like I said. And it's going to be interesting seeing how that goes forward, considering the fact of the matter is Marcos is with the Mutant Underground, and his business, him making business with the cartel, isn't necessarily going to paint the Mutant Underground in a positive light, because it's like, oh, the mutants are working with cartel people. Oh, they sell drugs, they hurt people. So it's going to compromise that, but at the same time, it's probably going to compromise Marco's relationship with Lorna, as well as just kind of like put him in a position, because he was already so focused on protecting, trying to get to Lorna, that, you know, arguably some people are like, well, you put us in danger, you know, with everything that you did. And now it's like, no, now you're putting us even more danger, because not only is he going off working with the cartel and everything, which could end up exposing them, but it's also because he's doing it in a secret. He's not even telling John, which John is like, yo, let me in, bro. Like, tell me what I can do to help. Some other things that went down this episode was the whole John and Clarice situation. Clarice is starting to dream about those memories that are inside of her head, and the lady who put the memories inside of her head, John's talking like, we need to tell her, you talk to Clarice about that, right? What do you mean you haven't done it? It's like, we need to, because before things kind of spiral out of control, it's like, the fact of the matter is they'll fade, they won't be anything serious. And John's like, well, what if they do turn into something? And basically her rebuttal, it's like, this is war. We don't have time to be caught up in all of that. I mean, that's the main reason why they're not dating. So I think this is kind of my hypothesis about this, because they were such intimate memories that she took from herself and implanted Clarice in. I think it made those memories even stronger, because initially they were meant to give her something to latch onto so that she could control her powers. And if you were to take that away from her, especially under the circumstances of trying to rescue Reed and Lorna, then she might not be able to tap into her powers. But at the same time, it's like, you don't know what the consequences could be. Because for right now, she's kind of shaking it off like, oh, they were dreams. But you could tell like moments where she's kind of getting close to John, asking all these questions and stuff. Like, it's starting to affect just their natural conversations and stuff, like her naturally around him, because, you know, to her, those memories are so real and vivid. But, you know, they're supposed to be like, oh, they'll fade away and stuff like that. But it feels like they're getting stronger. So maybe it's a combination of because she needed something to latch on for her powers, but also because she was missing that in her own life, that she didn't have that substitute in her own life. And so that hole being filled in her heart, it's like that part of her mind is clasping onto those memories. Her heart and her mind are clasping onto those memories for dear life. Or maybe because she was so fixated on trying to save John that she probably used a little too much of her power on Clarice. I mean, I am curious about that, because it seems like it was like one or two memories at most, but for the fact of them being kind of haunting Clarice in her dreams kind of means a lot. So that's definitely not going to be a lovely situation going forward. Like I said, I'm curious to see like the backlash of it. Like, for one big thing being the fact of the matter is it leaves you like, maybe she becomes obsessed. It compromises her judgment, especially if John tries to explain it to her. It's like, what does that mean? Because then it makes you start questioning. It's like, oh, well, if that's fake, what else is fake? Like, no, my feelings for you are real. You know, like I said, I use the example of like, maybe it turns into some like fatal attraction type of thing. Maybe not, but it's the last thing you want is like someone's mind muddled when you need a focused mind to use your powers as a mutant and everything, you know. So like I said, like, it was just little steps forward with that storyline. So I am curious to see what they ultimately do with that. But there was a really interesting thing this episode. Well, I mean, for one, you had Caitlin kind of being the brains of the operation. It's like, well, maybe we don't have to hit the prison. Maybe we could just hit them on route. It's like, oh, that's just a smart idea. And then she was the one kind of suggesting like, hey, maybe we shouldn't actually kind of do a frontal assault, because like we want to make sure everyone kind of gets out of this live. Reed and Lorna might get caught up in the middle. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of interesting that she's kind of like the brain, like not necessarily 100% the brains of the operation, but she's just kind of like hey, she throws out ideas. That was just kind of interesting. But obviously, like the thing I want to point out the most was also like seeing Andy and Lauren kind of work together really quickly. Something I've just been thinking about. It kind of I didn't realize it until like last week when I was watching Gotham. I was kept wondering why the actress who plays Lauren looks so familiar to me. It's because I forgot her character name. It's like Silver or something. She was Gallivant and Tabitha's niece in season 2 of Gotham. That's the same actress. I was like, right, that's just her like a couple years older, because that was like, what, season 2 was like roughly 2 to 3 years ago. And I was like, right, that was you, wasn't it? I was wondering about that. So it's also kind of interesting because it's like, that was a DC show, now she's in a Marvel show. I thought it was funny. But it's kind of interesting seeing how they can work their powers together, because obviously Andy can't really 100% control his powers, but when Lauren kind of uses hers in conjunction with his, they kind of whereas his power kind of bends thing, Lauren's power kind of compacts things, like compacts air together, and obviously uses it almost like a bubble shield and stuff like that, so she's able to more focus his power, and it's so interesting to see it kind of work together like that. Because it's something I forgot to bring up last week's episode too, because that scientist contacts Agent Turner. It's like, oh, I want these kids. And it's like also seeing their powers work in conjunction like that. It's almost like they were made to work together like that. I wonder, is that supposed to be a thing? Because obviously I was watching the trailer recently. Obviously a lot of the mutants we see in this episode, in the show, have like code names, like Lorna being Polaris, John being Thunderbird, Marcos being Eclipse, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, like, Andy and Lauren don't have one, so I am curious to know. It seems like they might be, like, TV original characters. They might not be in the comic books. When it comes, they might not be, like, comic book original mutants. It doesn't matter, but it's just kind of something I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I was wondering, like, what their code names would be. Apparently they don't have one, not unless they get ones later on in the show or something like that. Not unless who they are. I feel like it wouldn't be a situation of like, oh, man, let's hide their identities because it'd be a spoiler. It's like, I get the feeling they might be TV original. I mean, it might turn out to be the case that they actually are from the comic books as well, but nevertheless. That was just kind of an interesting thing, seeing their powers kind of work together, kind of gel like that together. Because we never really get, like, I guess it's kind of interesting because it's like we never really so far have gotten a real look at what kind of siblings they are. It seems like they get along, but at the same time, it's like typical sibling stuff of like they get on each other's nerves from time to time too. So like I said, I'm just curious to see like whether their powers working together is just like, oh, that's an awesome combination, or is there much more to that? Like almost like they were meant to kind of work together, like their powers tandem together. It's something all on its own. I don't know. And then there's also the side with Lorna and Reed kind of like being cellmates essentially and everything, and Reed trying to apologize to her. It's like, okay, I met with the mutant on the ground, I met Marcos. The fact of the matter is we should work together, which, he explains the whole situation. He apologizes because it's like he spent so much of his life, thinking like mutants were bad. It's like, oh, they did a bad thing, then they deserve to get locked up. But then it's like, oh, the script flips when it's his own children, and the fact of the matter is doing what they were doing, even though it was just defending themselves, still would have landed them in 10 years. And it's like a couple days prior to when your kids were a mutant, you as a prosecutor would have been like, well, they deserve to be locked up. Doesn't seem like he's 100% like okay with the way things are, but as we saw like in that flashback with Lauren like a year ago, like it was like he was okay with circumstances going down a certain way. Like, oh, rather than sticking up for the mutants, he stuck up for the general public just because that was kind of what his job was and everything. And it's kind of something similar. Lorna ended up saying something very similar that Marcos did too. Like basically, you're only in this situation because you found out your kids were mutants. If it were like, if you never found that out or your kids weren't mutants, you wouldn't be in this situation. You'd still be on the side of like, oh, we need to be fearful of mutants. Like we're doing the right thing, so. And for Lorna, it's like, think about all the stuff you've done, Reed. All the families you've torn apart, all the, trying to use my baby against me to manipulate me, all the people and lives you've ruined, trying to do the quote-unquote good thing, realizing that you are the bad guy. Don't try to come to me about apologies. Ask their forgiveness before you come to me. And it kind of puts things in perspective. Once again, like, if it weren't, like, the only reason why you care now about mutants and doing the right thing, not treating them as just criminals just because they did a bad thing. Like, these are people who are just, because they are different, they're being treated as such. Like, once again, not all of them are a danger to people, but it's just because of a mutation in their genes makes them a liability dangerous, you know? So it's like if your kids had never been mutants, then like where would you stand in this whole situation? It's like you wouldn't be here fighting for them. You'd be working with the Sentinel service to kind of bring them to quote unquote justice. So but it does seem like when it was all said and done, they did ultimately work together. Seems like so there is a little bit of a thing there where it's like, okay, things are kind of calming between them. It was pretty brutal. Like it's like she needed metal to use, so she ended up like Reed was like, use the pins in my legs, and she's like, what? He's like, just do it, and she used it, and you know, it ended up helping them escape. So at the very least, like I said, there is something there. So at least they're on good terms. But there's also like the aspect of what he did last episode, trying to, get taken back to Mutant Underground, but he met that family last episode, and he was just like, no, I'm sorry. So there's still that aspect. I guess they didn't make it to this particular Mutant Underground. They ended up at a different facility. It seems like I would have thought that those storylines would have crossed. Maybe they will be in the future, but for now, they're separate storylines. So... But I think that was kind of maybe meant to be like, okay, make Reed realize like what kind of a grave mistake what he was about to make, willing to sacrifice someone else's family and their safety for his own family, and like it would be something that he wouldn't be able to live with himself for anyway. Like this whole situation has broadened his horizons, and he thinks outside of the box, doesn't think like he did before. So character growth. But another interesting thing about this episode is we had a new mutant pop up. His name is Gus, played by the same actor who played Matt in the Vampire Diaries. So the moment I saw it, I was like, is that Matt? I was like, that's so cool. His name is also Pulse. Basically, he has the power to shut down signals, but he can also shut down mutant abilities. That sucks, because it's a moment where everyone needs their powers, and it's like, well, my powers aren't working. Well, especially for the one who kind of like, I guess his power is like bending light, and... like at the very least he can camouflage himself, like make himself like invisible. I don't know if it's like true invisibility or, like I said, is it like reflecting the light. It makes you wonder, could him and Marcos kind of work together in some shape or form and make Marcos blast even stronger? Nevertheless, that's just overthinking that. But nevertheless, he got it the hardest because he ended up getting shot because he was out in the open like that. But luckily John ended up taking him down. Whether or not they brought him back too, I don't know. It looked like John just knocked him down, but there was like a tattoo in his arm. So it does seem like Sentinel Services is using mutants. Like legitimately, that symbol, like I could have been mistaken on what that symbol is. For whatever reason, it kind of reminded me of Magneto's helmet. I don't know why, it just did. Like I got a quick look at it. I didn't stare at it. I'm like super wrong, I'm sure. But for whatever reason, it reminded me of Magneto's helmet. But nevertheless, it's like that was a friend of his that he thought died because he was trying to help him. They like 2 years ago, they were trying to break other mutants out. Some people died, and he tried to buy them time and ended up getting, well, John thought he was dead because that's like his best friend, but it turns out Gus was now working with the Sentinel Services. Now, whether it's 100% by choice, whether he's being forced to, who knows? But now this puts things in perspective, because we know that some of the mutants, like once mutants kind of get taken to a certain facility, they're never heard of again. Well, maybe that's because they are transformed, well, mess with mentally. Maybe there's like another mutant there to kind of reprogram them. Maybe that's what this doctor do that was taking an interest in Andy and Lauren. Maybe that's what he wants to do to them. Like obviously he wants to understand their abilities. And that makes me think about it too, because the reason why he's interested in them, because it was like he was reading an article about sibling mutants that call mass destruction. So I was like, so there does seem like there is a tie between them being siblings and their powers kind of having some compatibility together, meaning that maybe when they join their powers together, it can have devastating effects. Like obviously it's been more so to like isolate, like help, Lauren's power is meant to help isolate Andy's power, but if maybe she can actually use it to kind of actually spread Andy's power, like, the flip side of things, but we just kind of have to wait and see in that regard. But maybe they've got like a mutant who can control other mutants. At the very least, like they are maybe implanting stuff in their brains to kind of shift them, because it's not like he said anything. John's like, it's me. But then like he never responded, Gus never responded, so he just kept focusing on using his power, so that was about it. So the question is, what is up with that whole situation? I'm actually surprised. Like, yeah, there were some hitches in the plan, but ultimately everything worked out. Lorna and Reed got rescued. Everyone got away. Agent Turner's super pissed because he's like, bring them all. I want them all, you know? So we already know he kind of hates mutants. It does make me wonder, is like this situation going forward, will he be a lot more receptive to that doctor's ideas of like, oh, you get the children. He's like, do whatever you want to. They're mutants. I don't care. Do, you know, you want to cut them open, examine them, do what you want to. Beyond that, like, it's not. It seems like he wants to give mutants certain opportunities. It's like, oh, you have this opportunity to work with us, and maybe it's like, no, because ultimately you don't care. Like the whole like deal he tried to give Lorna last episode, like he was kind of doing for Ree. It's like, you don't care. You want them all behind bars because of his own personal struggle. Which, interesting enough, caught a glimpse of next week's episode. It seems like we're finally going to get what was it, July 15th? Was that the date that things kind of went down where it's like Agent Turner lost his child? And basically, I think that was the moment where things kind of took the severe turn that it did against mutants. So I think we're going to really understand like why everything kind of turned it the way it did. Now, whether or not it's going to be like that's going to be the entire focus of the episode, I'm very interested to see. Like I said, overall, a very good episode. Very great episode, actually, with just so much interesting information and aspects. Kind of, I'm like, I can't wait to see how they develop going forward, you know? So, but definitely in particular interested to see what goes on in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.